So in programming, you guys know that we have different things that we can create. Like we can create numbers, right? Like integers, we can create strings, and all these types of things. But let's say you need that data for a later time. So if you have the value of something that you need now, and you need to access it sometime later, you need to be able to store that data somewhere, right? So most programming languages do this through the concept of a variable. So I'm going to write a simple variable over here. So this is inside my class. Can anyone tell me what this code right here does? Yeah?
Sets a variable of a
Yeah. So just to go over naming conventions, this is the value of the variable right here. And this is the type over here. So in general, and this entire thing over here, this is called an assignment statement. Because you're assigning the value of something to a variable. And this variable is essentially what the variable does is it allows you to access A at another time. So if you need to do something to the variable, like some sort of operation, like if you have a bank account or something and you have this, and then you want to decrease your balance, you can use the variable to store the data, to store the value of your balance before and after the transaction. So the basic assignment statement looks as follows. We have data type here. And then over here you have something called an identifier. This is just jargon for name. So basically, the identifier that you specify when you create the variable for the first time is how you refer to that variable throughout the rest of your program. So this would be equals, and then value, and then your semicolon. And this entire thing is called an assignment statement. Okay? So let's say I wanted to do what I said previously, and I want to add some money to my bank account. Let's say I have $5 in my bank account right now, and let's say A represents, let's change this. Let's say balance represents my current balance inside of a bank account. And let's say I deposit $100 into my bank account. How could we represent that with the following story? Yeah?
balance plus 100.
Yeah, so, well, you would say this.
Or something equals.
Yeah, so what this does right here, this is like storing another value, right? The value of, if we put this in parentheses, the value of this entire thing would be 5 because you're using the identifier for the variable. So what Java does, it goes and finds that variable and gets the value and places it here. So it would take 5 plus 100, and this entire thing would be 105. But that's the exact same thing as writing. Just writing this, right? And Java wouldn't allow you to do this. You have to write balance equals 105, right? Now, we just said earlier that 105 is equal to balance plus 100, so we can replace this 105 over here with balance plus 100. Does everyone see how we can substitute the value that we defined earlier into here? Make sense to everyone? Okay. So what this does, this line right here, it takes the previous value that balance was before this assignment statement. This is another assignment statement. It takes that value, substitutes it in here, and then sets the new value of balance equal to this. whatever this value evaluates to. And now notice a couple of things on the syntax here. You don't declare the data type every time. Only the first time you declare a variable do you declare its data type. Java remembers that balance is an integer, and it stores that information, so whenever you refer to balance again, it knows that it's an integer. And in general, and this is going to use a lot of jargon, but I defined it already, so hopefully you guys should be good. But in an assignment statement, the identifier of the variable retains its type throughout the program. So let's dissect that statement a bit. Balance is always going to be an integer unless you explicitly change it, and we're going to go over how to do that later in another lecture. So balance is always going to be an integer, and Java knows this, so you can do integer operations over here. So let's introduce another data type, and then see a couple of things that we can. So let's say, what's another type of variable that could represent a real life scenario or thing? We have integers for numbers. What do you think another useful thing would be? Yeah?
String.
String. So if I wanted to represent my name in a program, I could do something along the lines of, and for Java, the data type for a string is a capital S, and then E-R-I-N-G. The S has to be capital, otherwise Java won't recognize it. Like it says string name equals, and then you surround it in quotation marks. So now if I did the following, what do you think this program will print out? Yes, exactly. You guys should be following along in your Eclipse too, by the way, so whatever examples I put here, just try it out yourself. Yeah?
Like, my Eclipse is not working.
Okay. Okay. So any questions so far? Everyone understands how this code works, right? Notice that you don't have quotation marks for this variable. This variable name goes and finds name, and it takes the value of it and puts it in here and prints that out. If I had quotation marks here instead, this is a literal string, so it's going to print whatever it has within the quotation marks. So in order to access the variable, you use only the identifier and you don't use quotation marks as separate statements. Okay? So let's say now I reassign the value of name. So let's say name equals. What do you guys think this will print out now? So what will this first statement print out? And what will the second statement print out? Similar? Okay, good. Does that make sense to everyone?
So does it matter that they name the variable the same
You're not defining two different variables with the same name. You're simply assigning a different value to this variable here. That's a very good question though, because what would happen if I did this? This wouldn't work, because this is another declaration.
Yeah.
You can't have, yeah, it's a very good point. You can't have two variables with the same name.
So basically later in that code, you're reassigning name to
Exactly. So this goes and finds whatever variable it was, takes this value and stores it
in there for it.
Yeah, exactly. Good job. So the reason we can't have two variables with the same names is the following. Let's say I made an integer and I called it name and I said its value equal to 5. So the basic problem is when I execute this line of code right here, which one would it print? Would it print the first name, the string, or would it print the integer name? And the end, yeah? No. Well, if we took out the integer, then and then we put quotation marks in, and yes, it would print 5. But this code wouldn't even run because Eclipse pre-compiles the code for you. So as soon as you enter this into Eclipse, it's going to see that there's 2 separate variable declarations, basically just declaring a variable, and you have the same name for each one. So Java knows that when you run the program, it's not going to know which one of these you're referring to, and so it tells you that you have to change one of these names. So if you guys are trying this in Eclipse, it should give you an error before you even try running. So we're completely good on strings and integers, right? No questions so far?
How many different types of identifiers are there? Not identifiers, data types.
Data types?
Yeah.
I'll get to that in a second. Yeah?
So strings just means like words.
What was that?
String, it just means like words.
Yes, if you see strings, just think words. So to answer your question, there's lots of data types, and some of them we don't need for the AP test. But the basic one we'll be going over today are the double, the integer, strings, and here, cars. So you would imagine, let's just go through these one by one. And there's lots of different mathematics devoted to how these things are represented and all that, and we'll get into that in another lecture. So going through these one by one, you guys already know what integers and strings are. So doubles, imagine the bank account scenario one more time. Only this time, let's say I have $7.50. So an integer can only be a whole number, right? So it can be a positive or negative whole number, and the range is pretty big. We'll go over that. So if I want to say int valid equals 7.5, if you guys try this in Eclipse, you'll see that it won't work because it'll tell you that 7.5 isn't an integer, and therefore this can't be represented as an integer in the computer storage. So to solve this, Java has a data type called a double. And a double basically takes this and stores it in the same way it stores an integer. However, something to note is that a double requires more storage than an integer. And that makes sense because it has to account for decimal points, or decimals if there are any. So it takes more storage than an integer. And we'll go into exactly how much more and what the trade-offs are later on. So if I print out double now, you guys all know about that, right? Anyone? What would this output?
7.5.
Yes. Alright. So,
Wait, what did you put balance in there, not double?
oh yeah. Yes, you're right, Like that, yeah. So the identifier will go and replace the value of 7.5, and then it would print 7.5 out. Alright, so let's do an exercise. So we can come around and check how you guys are doing on this one. We're going to have double balance equals 7.5 and double deposit is equal to 100.5. And now I'm going to insert a comment here. So if I were to run this code, this comment wouldn't do anything. So this is just for instruction. I want you to print out. I want you to define a variable to store the sum, and then print this variable. Probably in the next 5 minutes. Now, if anyone needs help, ask one of us, and then I'll be coming around and check.
Okay, can you guys tell me who else couldn't download Eclipse? Anyone else? Okay, good. Anyone have waivers? They didn't learn last week. Oh yeah, that's it. You have that? Yeah.
Can I get one? Waiver?
Yeah. So it's my first one. You can print out.
Where is that sounding?
It's in there. Waivers online.
Yeah.
On MSJ, ACM, ACS, and MSJ.
Okay.
It's online. fine. It's not on YouTube. It's also on our site. I can send it over.
What do I need to bring for every class?
Using Ubuntu?
Computer and a yeah, just computer. And the outline. So on our first section, what we explained. Look at the thing that says 9-29, I think. And then on that it has all of the resources. So everything that you get, and you have notes, so just look at notes.
How's it going? Is it good?
You kind of understand what that is. We'll go over that. Thanks.
Were you want to go first week? Our lecture's online on YouTube.
Did you go?
Last week.
You guys have anyone still working? Yeah. I'll go over it on the board. You want me to go over it on the board?
Yes.
Alright, good. So, first, we have to define a variable, and we have to store the sum of these two, correct? So, let's go through the defining part first. What would the data type be? Just anyone shout it out. Double, good. Data type has to match what you're adding, right? And you can call the name whatever. Someone give me a name.
New balance.
New balance. Okay, and the problem with just writing 7.5 plus 100.5 is that if you want to go back and change the value of your deposit for whatever reason, you'd have to go and change this too. So if we can somehow replace these with variable names, then you would only have to change your code in one portion and the rest of your code would reflect that change. So the value of 7.5 is stored by balance. So does it make sense that we can replace 7.5 with balance?
Yeah.
Okay, let's do that. And then same thing with this. So we can replace this with deposit, right? So it's plus deposit. And now we have to print this variable. So you want to give me the code to do that? How would you print new balance?
System dot out print you found
Yep, good job. Yeah. So everyone has a pretty good feel for doubles now, right? Just basically adding decimal points. And the last kind of data type that I'm going to be covering today is the, you guys know how it's pronounced? Character, but it's abbreviated to the first four letters. Is it char? Char?
Some people pronounce it car, some people pronounce it char.
Okay, I'll go with car. So basically you can just think of a car as a one-letter string. So if I want to define a car, do car and then letter grade. And then you put one value for the character, and you surround it in single quotes as opposed to double quotes. So this would be single quotes, and then you put something like A. And now if we did something like system, the left line. Letter grade. This would print out A, right? The value of letter grade is just a single character. So you can just think of it as a single string. So let's do another quick exercise. I'm going to write a program and I want you guys to mimic the behavior but using only cars. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to say string greeting equals I. And I'm going to print out greeting. So I want you guys to recreate the output of this program. So first figure out what this would print. And then I want you guys to recreate this, only you guys can't use the string data type. Try doing it using only the car data type. Sound good? Alright, and I'll come around the thing. Yeah.
What's he saying? Let me see it. So look at what it's saying. It says it's pointing at this E right there. And it's saying that they cannot find this symbol. So
When does that give you numbers? When I did that, and then when you compile it. But for some reason when I ran that,
everyone attempt the problem? Yes, no?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. So how many of you got numbers when you tried printing this out? 209. Anyone? Yeah. How did the rest of you guys do it? Did you just use the print statement instead of print LN and print one and the other? Is that what you did? Yeah. So when you create a character and second character, so when you do this, you should have, if you run this code as opposed to if you did anything else, this will actually give you a number. This should print out 209, and I promise we'll go over that in a separate class. We'll get into it. But the way to get this solution working right now is, remember in the first class we talked about how if you don't want the new line, you can just do system.out.print. So you would just print the value of h, and then in a separate line you would do system. And this would print it both on the same line. And I promise we'll go over why the previous example prints out numbers in a coming up lecture, okay? So now, as you guys can tell, if you have lots of variables, it's really easy to get lost and lose track of which one is supposed to represent which inside of the program. So there's a couple of naming conventions that Java uses, and it's really important that you guys adhere to this, because when you're writing larger blocks of code, you yourself can lose track of what you wrote previously.
And so I'll start talking about proper naming. So first, in order to make, first, any class naming, the specific naming convention for each class is that the first word of this class has a capital letter. Then the second word would have another capital letter. So this is an example of a proper name for a class. So if you, so then after that, okay. Okay, and then, okay. So, now for variables. So these variables are also called fields. And so the proper naming for these are, so let's say you wanted to create, so let's say I wanted to describe myself, right? So for let's say I wanted to write my name first. So I'll write string, and then I'll write my name. So for the proper naming convention for a variable is the first letter of the variable is lowercase, and then the first letter of the first word is lowercase, and then the next word, the next word and the following words, whatever the first letter for each of those is uppercase. So let's say I was going to write my name variable, right? So this would be the proper naming convention for a variable. And then I'm going to write string and then okay? Now, let's say, so if I wanted to write my age, again, it would be let's go on. So now I want you guys to write a variable, have now kind of to like that something that encompasses this entire so far what we've taught. So I want you guys to write a program that describes yourself and use the following data types in this. Use a string, use a car, use an int, and use a double. And then use a program that describes all that, and then use that as a basis. And when you guys are done, I'll tell you the next step. So,
How do you embed a variable in like double quotes?
what do you mean?
Like, how do you put a variable in double quotes? How do you escape a variable?
Oh,
Run a variable in double quotes. So, forget this. My name is in Ruby. You would do something like this.
I see. Yeah. Okay, I'll show you that in a minute. I'll show you. Yes. Super. So for this, just start with this, and then write a program that describes yourself, and then when you're done, I'll tell you this. So just tell me the answer. And then I'm going to tell you guys the official naming convention according to Java, because if I tell you something and I mess up on it, then it'll be very bad for me. Also, for Java has these really specific naming conventions, and if you don't abide by them, the program won't be considered good quality code. So I want to make sure that I specify each and everything that's correct, and then try taking notes on it. You guys done? Is everyone done? Just raise your hand if you're done. And then I'm going to tell you how to embed a variable into a string. Don't do any printing yet, just write the variables.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Just any quality that describes you. Java. Okay, now I'll move on just for a little. So this is how you embed a string in a line of code, right? So in a system.out. So increase the size here. So let's say I wanted to write my name variable is this. In my 16. So let's say I wanted to write my name is let's say I want to write the following. Right? Let's say I want to write Simmer is 16 without having to write the variables right here. So what you would do is without having to write the string itself. So with only using variables. So what I would do is system.out print my name plus is plus my age. This should give you Simmer 16.
There's no way to actually embed it inside the book.
Yes. No, there's no way to embed it inside. Right, Chris?
No.
This is the only way to do it. Well, no, there is, but for now, it's. Yeah, so for example, if you have a floating point, right, you're at percent at 10%. So, but later on. So for now, just know this. So just do that with your code. And whatever double and everything, just try manipulating it. If you need help, just ask me. Also, I want to stress that make sure you guys have the right naming conventions for everything. Yeah.
We use a decimal form. Anyway, we use decimal forms to say the numbers.
Oh, that's no, you don't have to worry about it. Not yet. You're not talking about that stuff. Don't worry about that. Anyone else need help? Oh.
Why do chars have to be in single parentheses, I mean single quotes instead of double quotes?
It's conventional.
But if it's double quotes, it doesn't work.
Yes, that's conventional.
It's conventional. Again, they're gonna, because a car is a single string, a single letter, right? So if you don't, double quotes are only specifically for strings. In car, it's specifically for it's conventional. It's however, if you've ever done C, you can do that once. Okay, is everyone done? Okay, so now I'll go over this. So I've taught you guys that system.out.println. I'm just gonna system.out.println prints it on a new line, right? But there's some in this statement, in the system.out.print statement, there is something called an escape statement. So an escape statement allows you to print that character on a new line or print it with a tab. So I'll show you the main escape statement. And so it's this slash. Is this forward or back?
Backwards. Backwards. It's backwards. You're right.
The tab, right? So this is a new line. This is another way to write a new line, okay? So let's say I wanted to write simmer, and then I wanted to write on a new line is 16. So what I would write in that case would be system.out. .print. And actually, let's say I wanted to start with a tab to make it like, yeah, start with a tab, okay? I write this. I write backslash t, forward slash t, backslash t, simmer is 16. And actually, no, I want to write new lines, right? So is 16. And then this would print up. The output for this would be the following. Simmer is 16. So try using on this code. Try using your try using some escape characters like some backslash n and backslash t with your print statement.
So what's backslash key again?
Tab.
Then backslash n is new one.
Yeah. Here are some other escape characters that you guys can work with. But these are the main two that you ever use, so don't worry. But the other escape characters that you can work with are /B, backslash B stands for backspace. So if you try working with that, here's an important one. So let's say you wanted to embed a quote inside your print city, right? So what you would do is system of that dot print line print simmer. Let's say I want to write it as the code, right? I want to do the output the following. Simmer is 16. So for that, in that case, I would write, make sure that, yeah. So I write this backslash, quotes, simmer is 16, and then it would be quote backslash. And then post in cases, and then this would print simmer, this would print default. Because in case you ever want to use quotes, this is how you do it. Try doing it in your code. So just write, my name is this age. Just to make sure, when you guys are done with that, I want you guys to do the following activity, right? So I want you to print this. Do you know the asterisk? I'm just going to represent this as a dot, but print a square. How much? So print a 3x3 square. Try doing something like that with your print statements.
And don't use print ln. Just use print.
Yeah, use print and then try using escape characters with that.
So if anybody, just try and do that.
Just try doing that.
And for extra challenge, you just middle that out. So just make it an outline of a square. And tell us if you don't know how to do it. So using only system.out.print.
And only with one statement. Check it out. Also, if you want to leave more space, remember to use backslash 2.
We'll give you guys a couple minutes to do that, and then let's share solutions out loud.
And then we'll give you a function. Okay, and then we'll talk about one more thing about variables.
Does anyone have any questions on the topics that have been discussed so far in class? Variables, identifiers. We can come and work with you individually if you have doubts that you want to clear out.
Also remember, she means identifiers as naming.
Yeah, naming. So for your reference, if you guys can't remember, you can do a backslash T, and that's a tab. You can do a backslash N, and that's a new line. And then you can just, in your double quotes, you can put spaces, just hit the space bar, and that's considered a space. It won't delete it. So those are some of the things you can use. When someone comes up with a solution and it works, just raise your hand and let us know.
Oh, I didn't. How do you do this? How do you do it?
The install asterisk.
If you need any help, just raise your hand. I won't come over.
Oh, did you download those?
Yeah, she has it.
So there's some others, but I doubt you'll ever need to use them. So I'll tell you them. There's slash, try backslash R, and I feel like there's
Yeah,
one
so
more getting.
the saving is.
But backslash R and backslash F actually. Those I haven't used them before, so you get to something. But these are the official Java docs. So Java doc is where you do your type, where all the where syntax requirements and different classes and like the functions are listed. So if you want to search it on Java, but you'll never need to use slash backslash R or backslash.
Does anyone want to share out loud how they did it? It's pretty straightforward. Anybody else? Chris?
Okay, so I listed system.out.print, and in parentheses I had my, I forgot what they called.
Just call it a star.
Okay.
Yeah.
I had 3 asterisks, and I had in between those 3 sets, I had backslash n.
Okay. So what he's saying is he had the asterisk, 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 backslash n, which is effectively the same thing as using a print ln statement for just this. So it pushes what's after this onto a new line. Another 3, another n, and then 1, another 3. Yeah.
I have a question. Is that print ln statement, does that print that string on the next line, or is it printed, does it make
So,
the next line on the next line?
If you did print ln and you did a star, it would print this star, but then it would automatically move the output cursor to the next line.
Okay.
So then the next thing that you print would be on another line. So it just affects the position of the thing after it.
So if you had a statement before that was like system print asterisk, then you had that statement, would it be on the same line as the previous
Yes.
one?
So if you had a print and then you had an asterisk,
Yeah.
then the output of this would be a star and a star because there's no line left. Okay.
Okay. Now Harshita will start talking about logical errors and syntax errors.
Okay, so I want you guys to put something in to your, just put in a line, use one of your print statements, take the semicolon out. What happens? I want you to tell me what Eclipse tells you.
Syntax error, insert semicolon, complete statement.
Okay. So it tells you syntax error. So now I'm going to talk about the different kinds of errors that you can have in Java programming and what a syntax error specifically means. So there's 3 kinds. You have syntax, you have runtime, and you have logical. And right now, with the amount of programming that you've done, runtime and logical might not make as much sense, so we're going to focus on syntax, but it's important to know that these 2 exist also. So what a syntax error is can anyone define the word syntax for me? What does syntax mean? We do this in English class too.
Conformity to rules.
Exactly, so it's the rules or the grammar of a language. So just like English has its syntax and the way that you would structure sentences and such, the same way a programming language has its syntax. So if you forget to leave a period out, that's an English syntax error, almost, right? So some common examples of a syntax error in Java would be, for example, the most common one leaving a semicolon out, which is something that people do so often that they don't take points off for it on the APCS test. Another is if you remember how when you created a new class, you hit new class and you typed in a name for it, and then Eclipse automatically generated a file for you. What did it put in that file that it automatically generated? Do you remember the code that it gave you instantly that you didn't have to put in?
Public class.
Exactly, and then it put the name that you had entered in when you created the class, right? So if you go in right now and change the name of that class and tell me what error you get, just add an extra letter somewhere. Yeah.
The public characters must be defined in some file.
Okay, so it's basically, it gets really confused. Yeah.
I don't get an
You don't get an error for changing the name.
error. I don't use it.
Oh, yeah. So Eclipse another thing to note is that different compilers, so what you're using is a programming environment / compiler, and that's what Eclipse is. So different compilers have slightly different ways of dealing with errors. So for example, in the compiler that you might